Welcome and thank you for joining us for this first installment of our 2026 Trustee Training Session. I'm Dan Alexander. I'm the Continuing Education Consultant with Northeast Kansas Library System. Joining us for today's recording is my colleague, Robin Hastings, a fellow Neckles consultant. Hi, Robin. Thanks for being here. I want to remind you at this point that Neckles is here to support you in your library, so please do reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Our presenter here today is Lacie Griffin. She's the Collection Development Manager for Johnson County Library. Since 2024, Lacie has chaired the Kansas Library Association's Intellectual Freedom Committee, doing a lot of great work there, and is one of Kansas's two inaugural representatives to the American Library Association's Law for Librarians program. Lacie has extensive experience in collection development, intellectual freedom, and responding to materials challenges. So welcome, Lacie. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. What I was asked to talk about today, and then this first video is talking a little bit about soft censorship and kind of like what that is. Sometimes it's also called silent censorship, and kind of what Kansas libraries are facing when we talk about that. So normally when we talk about censorship, we'll be talking about, this is when somebody has tried to suppress ideas and they have tried to hide books or burn books or remove books, or even just put warning labels on different books saying like, read it, this may contain things in it. And so censorship as a whole has been really a big thing in the news and in the national media lately. The difference between censorship and soft censorship or silent censorship kind of goes with that silence word. Censorship itself is usually very formal and there's usually documentation about it. And it's usually when somebody has removed a book because of its contents or disagreement with the material and what it says. When it comes to silent or soft censorship, that is a little bit different and a little harder to track. It is soft and silent in its ways. And when we talk about it in that form, we're really talking about it's not a formal ban, and it's really an avoidance to controversy or trying to like not ripple the waters. And so one of the things that we've seen within our profession with soft censorship is librarians, especially in smaller communities or communities that have a very vocal community base, not want to upset the apple cart. And so they will not select things to purchase for their library, just so that they don't have to deal with the consequences or deal with outrage or deal with anything that's gone on at a national level. When it comes to different controversies or even requests to ban books in the state of Kansas, we're actually pretty small compared to everything that's going on in the nation. It does sound like something that's very rampant. You hear about it on the news and everything, but in the state of Kansas, we're a little bit more subdued, which is nice. We also don't have a huge bit of those national pushes or organizations that are trying to take like whole lists out. But even with those stats and even with those things that we know have been happening or reported, it is still, can be scary for a library or a librarian to put something in that has fallen on one of those national lists. And with that, and with kind of some of the outrage or even the loud, I was to say, bits that are in the news and things like that, it's definitely something that's really worrisome and just, something that a lot of librarians have in the back of their mind when they're starting to work on things. And so that is something that we really take seriously in our profession. And we do a lot of outreach and we do a lot of education with librarians to make sure that either consciously or even subconsciously that they aren't making choices in that kind of realm, and that they're keeping things available, and that they're trying to make sure that they have all perspectives of a different viewpoint or a different subject matter available for everybody to be able to use. One of those things that's really important when we want to, when we talk about wanting to have all viewpoints represented and not shy away from any controversial viewpoints, is it's like the foundation for the intellectual freedom just as it is a philosophy. We believe that every American has the right to be able to make their own decisions and their own beliefs, and they have the right to be able to seek any information that they want from all sides of an argument so that they can decide for themselves where they want to believe, where they want, what they want to learn, what they want to agree with. And that we really limit the capacity of being able to like make those decisions if we are limiting what kind of viewpoints or what kind of voices that person is able to have access to and be able to hear and draw from and listen to. Every American has the right to be able to believe, think, decide everything for themselves. And we don't want to handicap that by limiting what kind of viewpoint or what kind of information is available for them to be able to read.
Soft censorship,
Yeah.
leaving these books off because I don't think my community is interested in them. How do you balance that? Do you know?
Yeah,
Do you
that
have
is
a
the million dollar
formula?
question, right? Yes.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, even having a big system like we do here in Johnson County, like space is still limited. There are hundreds of thousands of titles that come out every year, and there's not enough space to be able to get all hundreds of thousands of titles every year, year after year after year, right? So what I always say when this type of thing is you want to, look to your mission and your vision of your library and make sure that your selection processes are going in with that. Here at Johnston County, ours is about access to information to enrich people's lives. And so a lot of times we'll be like, are we providing access or are we restricting access? If we are restricting access, why? And that why is very important because like we cannot buy every single thing that's been printed in every single viewpoint in every single, you know, in the whole wide world, right? And so what you want to do is you want to provide the things that are going to increase the most access. So, if I have a community that is very Hispanic, like I have a very large Hispanic population, and I want to make sure I have a lot of Latina books, then maybe would look into that and research that, and then maybe that's the diversity or window that we have the most of, right? You want to make all of those decisions not necessarily viewpoint or content based. You want to try to round it out as much as you possibly can, and you want to err on the right of provide like what is making it easier for my public to see it and what is increasing the access. One of those things I always bring up is children's department. Sometimes, in some ways, if you segregate the collection between adult and children's, which everybody does,
right.
that can be seen as censorship, just because you are saying that this part of the collection is for a certain age group. I always bring up the example. I used to be a teacher, and I worked with a gentleman who's wonderful, Mr. Dial, if he's out there anywhere. He was a wonderful first grade teacher, but when he started, he was a 23-year-old, unmarried, no kids, first grade teacher, and he always felt completely off when he went to the public library to get books for his classroom because he was questioned all of the time as being
Oh,
just a
yeah.
23-year-old male by
Right.
himself in there. So unless they knew him, it was really awkward and weird. And so like it's an interesting part where just by doing that one coordination, you're actually blocking and making it harder for a certain population. If you are making that decision on purpose to block or make it harder for a certain population, then that's when it's crossing a line into that censorship, right?
Right.
It's separated so that the intended audience for those books has a better and more access and it's
Yeah.
easier for them to use. So those are kind of where I fall into those realms because there's also weeding is really difficult, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes we're like, how do people decide how to get rid of everything? Which you have to if you're going to buy anything new.
Hmm.
It's those same type of things. Like, has it been used? Is it a subject that you already have a lot of books about? Is it dated? Does it need to be is it got information that has changed? Or, I always think about when I was a kid, which is probably going to date myself, everything, all of the Germany books or the Russia books, like, are the countries correct inside of these books?
Right.
Is the Berlin Wall still in there? Those type of things where it's increasing the information, increasing the access, increasing the usability of it, as opposed to decreasing it.
Yeah. That brings me back to thinking about, talking about where we shelve things.
Yeah.
Obviously, some libraries will say, we'll keep this book, but we're going to shelve it not with the picture books. It's going to be an adult section. And then the other example that came to my mind is they might say, we're not going to get rid of this book, but we're going to keep it behind the circulation desk, and people have to know that we have it and they can ask it. And they might be doing it for lots of different reasons. The whole Dr. Seuss book thing comes to
Yeah.
mind, where people were swiping them because they became kind of valuable because they're not in print or changing the print. So I
Hmm.
don't know. When people ask you about, especially behind the desk type thing, because I feel like that's a whole other world, a whole other
Hmm.
conversation than just deciding to move a book to a different part of library. Thoughts on
Yes.
either of those scenarios? Because I
Yeah,
think
so that
people run
happens
into them.
often. So I handle, like you had said earlier, I handle all the requests for reconsiderations for Johnson County Library, and 99% of those are not to remove the book completely, but are asking, is the book in the correct location? So I often, in those type of situations, will do a deep dive on that particular title to make sure that it's matching. And so what we will do a lot of times when it comes to like where a book lives in the library is you look at, so librarians as a profession have quite a few tools at their hands to be able to do those things. We do not make those decisions just like on our own personal. I always tell my selectors, the people who order all of our books, you just check all your biases at the door. Like you try to like be as completely a white slate as, clean slate as
Hmm.
you can be.
Hmm.
And what we'll use is we'll use professional reviews. We'll use actually even neighboring libraries. We'll see where everybody else is put. We'll go with publisher reviews. And then lately, we've been actually even looking at different social media reviews or different fan sites and blogs and things like that as well, especially when we're looking at trying to figure out a genre of a book. Because,
Hmm.
like, you know, right now you can have like a space vampire romance that has a monster inside of it and you hit like every
Right.
single genre, right? So it's like, all right, if we're going to pick a genre, where does that fall? And so a lot of libraries actually have even kind of like made fiction sections with like a secondary genre section and put everything in a fiction section with secondary genres because like it's impossible to figure out what's
Yeah.
horror now and what's mystery and what's thriller. So we'll use those type of things to be able to figure it out. And so one of the interesting things that I don't know if a lot of people know about libraries is we'll get things pre-published. And so we're actually not reading every single book that comes in. And trying to figure out like where it should go and what genre is and things like that, which is good because there's then that human bias is always in there as well, right? And so when we're doing that ahead of time, what the publisher has put for its BISAC, for its subject heading, for its age level, for what kind of intended audience it is huge in that very first decision. And most of the time, there'll be some reviews that we can also back that up with and see. And then later, if it comes in and like I get a request for consideration, like, hey, I don't know if this really should be in juvenile, maybe it should be in teen, then I'll go back and check all of those different markers and see where everybody else has had it as well and kind of like check that against our collection development policy to be able to see if it meets the criteria we have set for that certain audience level or for that certain space in the library. Collection development policies and having those things labeled out and exactly what you intend by each of those collections is huge. That way you're also you're following what is in policy for the library, what has already been set down by the library board as like, this is what should be in this section. And then you can use that as evidence when you write. I do move things from time to time.
Yeah. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you more about collection development policies in the second part because I feel like that fits better with that topic.
Yeah.
But I wondered at first, is there anything that you were going to jump to that I cut you off from as far as this kind of,
Ah,
because I
that
feel
was
like
the
this is
biggest
our
part of soft
framework of
censorship.
in IF, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Robin, is there anything that you wanted me to elaborate on or that I might have missed?
Um, it just that I see librarians doing the self-censorship all the time and they don't realize they're doing it. They're just like, oh, my folks would never go for that, so I'm just not going to buy it. And they don't know. But they don't want to have to deal with the possibility that it might cause waves. And so I see librarians who are really earnestly trying to serve their communities who are censoring themselves in a soft way. So I don't really have any questions that came up, but just I see it all the time, and I hope that um, that this helps people understand, think about things before they.
Yes. No, that's a good one. One of the things that, especially when I started helping out and started working statewide with people on collection development policies or on soft censorship, was there was this people didn't want to talk about it. It was almost taboo. People felt like they would be judged. People were scared of the word. And I used to start talks with like, censorship and Voldemort. Like, say the word. It is okay. It happens. Everybody is human. You might have no idea that something is making you feel a certain way, or that, it's completely human nature to be worried and not want to have controversy and not want to steer away from having conversations that are hard and icky and are about people's beliefs. And that is a human quality and something that no one should feel bad about, and no one should, nobody's judging you for that. Nobody is upset with any librarian that has to work through a request for reconsideration. One of the biggest things that we've done with the helpline and with the KLA Intellectual Freedom Committee is letting people feel comfortable talking about it. Like, it is okay to talk about it. It's one of the reasons why I bring up the children's section as being like, without even thinking about it, we're kind of like making this poor first grade teacher not be able to get any of the books without like a whole bunch of anxiety every time he walks in, right? Being a place and a space for everyone means that you will have everyone. And being everything for everybody puts you in places that can even personally feel very awkward, or make it very hard for you to like navigate through that type of situation. And so one of the things I always think about too is like when I have had requests for reconsiderations, or when someone has asked me about a book, and whether it should be in this picture book section, or whether it should be, should 13-year-olds read this? They had an experience with the book that scared them, or was uncomfortable for them, or put them in a conversation that was really hard for them with their kid. And I always meet them at that place in those conversations, because 99% of the people I talk to are coming from a good place and are trying to save the next person from that awkward conversation. They're trying to save the next mom from having to explain something that they were not ready to explain, or questions that they weren't ready to answer. And so it's a very vulnerable, like regular human place to come from. And that's the same with the librarians in soft censorship. Like, they're just trying to protect the library from any sort of awkwardness, hard conversation being. And so, like, there's a lot of grace that I've been trying to get the profession to give each other, because a lot of times you haven't even noticed that this thing has happened. And
Right.
so, and that's fine. And it's okay if you didn't notice, and it's okay to change course. It's okay it's okay to be in the situation, or to have the conversations, or to be where you're at. And so we really work hard to meet everybody where they're at.
You'd said moving things is the big question.
Mhm.
I went to a conference at Every Library, the organization that supports libraries, did a presentation, and they said that of the challenges that come out, some percentage, not a huge percentage, but 4 to 6%, are correct. The book should have been challenged. It was in the wrong spot, and the
Yeah.
challenge was correct. And so meeting every challenge with the possibility that they are correct and they have a point, and it's not always adversarial. So that was
Yes.
the other thing that occurred to me while you were speaking.
Yes, I often find myself, since we have a nonfiction section that is, we have a picture book, everybody nonfiction section, and then we have one specifically for like 8 to 12-year-olds. And there's a lot of books in the 90s that are even, Newbery or Caldecott, nominees and awards that maybe shouldn't be in the picture one anymore and need to be moved up into the 8-12. And so I've done things like that quite a bit. Yeah, I probably move a book one per year on average. One of the things that we do too is even if they do want the book removed, we look at whether the book should be like whatever the request for reconsideration is for, whether it's to remove the book or whether it's to move the book. We always look at both of those things in any request. So if I just get one of those forms, we'll first see if it needs to be removed, if it didn't meet our selection criteria. And then the second, I'll always look, even if they didn't ask, to see if it needed to be moved. Because like things have changed since the 90s.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. All right. Well, I think that was a really great overview of soft censorship, and then wrapped in there like a nice, just kind of general intellectual freedom conversation, or a start to a conversation. So thank you, Lacie. Thank you, Robin Hastings, for joining us in this part one. Thank you, trustees, for viewing this first part of our recording. Again, reach out to us, follow-up questions or further discussion, and be sure to tune into part two of this trustee training. We'll see you then.